Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. How are you? Hope that you're doing well. It is early morning here. Well, not so early. It's around 10 o'clock in the morning here in Los Angeles, California. So wanted to talk today about the best timing for marriage. I've had a few talks with sisters who are questioning if it's the right time, and it's a constant question. This question about timing, and I think that a lot of the media and messaging that's coming from Western entertainment, Western music, kind of confuses that timing. But let's get into it. So when is the right time to get married? This actually it's a mathematical question in many ways, right? Because we're talking about time, right? Time runs out. You don't have time to do everything all the time. We've got about more or less, if you have a relatively long life, around 80 years on the planet, and then you're done. So let's start with the sisters. It's always easier for me to talk about the timing for sisters because sisters have an additional, clock inside the clock, which is determined by, well, first of all, if you want to have children. So if you're a sister and you want to get married, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, do you want to have children? If you want to have children, then that changes the math substantially, right? So here's the clock. Geriatric pregnancy. Geriatric pregnancy is a term used for having a baby when you're 35 or older. Okay, so what does that mean? Geriatric pregnancy risks. Problems can arise no matter how old you are when you get pregnant, but some problems become more likely when you hit 35. High blood pressure, which can lead to preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, miscarriage or stillbirth, labor problems, premature birth, low birth weight, Down syndrome. Okay, so these are just risks that increase after 35. And so if you want to have children, obviously you want to reduce the risk to yourself and to your child. But then there's also the question of how many children you want to have, right? Because obviously the more children you have is the earlier you want to start. Because if you have your first child at 35, and let's say for example, you want to have 3 children. Okay, you want to have 3 children. In general, with kids, you want to stair step them. So you don't want to have them too close together, just because it's more trauma on the body. But you also don't want to have them too far apart because it's more work to raise them. It kind of elongates the period of time that you're having the pressure of raising children. And so more or less, we're looking at around 2 years between children is kind of ideal. Right, so you don't want to start having them at 35, right? So 35 for ladies is kind of like the upper right bracket there. What's the lower bracket? Well, for brothers and sisters, it's kind of simple. It's when you're physically able to have children, and then also when you're emotionally ready to have children. So the physical part is easy, right? I mean, this is puberty, right? And then the emotional part is a bit subjective. But let's just say roughly, brothers and sisters can technically get married at maybe around 18 or 19 years old, depending on what your culture permits, and also, of course, the laws and where you're from. But let's just say 18 or 19 is kind of like the lower age bracket. All right. So again, going back to the ladies, then we're looking at marriage sometime between 18 and 35 on the upper end, if you want to get married, if you want to have children. And the more children you want to have is the lower the marriage age. Okay, so that's simple calculation right there. Okay, so then what's next? But you also have to think, ladies, you also have to think about what brothers are looking for, right? Because we are the market. We determine what is valuable in the market because we get to decide who we're going to marry, right? In a way, sisters determine who's going to be born, and brothers determine technically, right? And brothers determine who's going to get married because we propose and you accept or reject the proposal. So, in general, when a brother's looking for a wife, he's looking for a younger sister. In general, brothers don't look for sisters who are who are older, right? So that's one thing. So your youth, when looking to get married, has value to the brother who's going to marry you, as well as your ability to have children, right? So we got the technical part, which is the geriatric pregnancy. Now let's look at, let's fine tune a little bit more. Now, in terms of timing for the brothers, last week, if you recall, we talked about the Quran, chapter 2, verse 233, right? And that basically spelled out what it is that brothers have to do to be prepared for marriage. And so it's not like you're physically able to have a child and you're legally able to have a child, and therefore you run out and get married, right? There's some preparation that brothers have to do in order to be ready to be married. And so that raises the lower bar for the brothers, is that, okay, so technically at 18 you can, 18, 19 you can, but there's work that you have to do. So let's, there's no, and subhanAllah, it's beautiful how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes things easy for us. He gives us, he gives us parameters, but he gives us pressure, but within the pressure, he also gives us the ability to make decisions using his guidance, right? And so he doesn't say you must do it by this age and this is the time. He says, listen, I want you to get married. I want you to have families. Here is the broad guidelines, and then here are some further guidelines so that you can make a decision that's best for you in your life. Okay, so for the brothers, let's say, for example, that the work that brothers have to do to get ready to be married, and I'm not going to rehash that because we talked about it last week. Let's say that work takes just around 3 to 5 years. Okay, so let's say that it takes 5 years. Okay, so and the work that you have to do is being having a job, having some level of income, being an outstanding member of your community. Outstanding simply means that you're not just serving yourself, you're also working to serve the community. It means that you're even in terms of the work that you've done on yourself, that you're a man of your word, that you do what you say that you're going to do. So there's work that you have to do on yourself as well as out in the world to be ready as a man to be married. So let's say that work takes just around 5 years, right? So that kicks up the lower limit for the brothers from 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Okay, so then the minimum for brothers is around the 23. Now let's go back to the sisters, right? So if you want to have children, then the upper age is 35. And then, but again, you don't want to play with fire, right? And so if you want to have one child, then reduce that to minimum of 33. If you want to have two, then you reduce it to the minimum of 31. If you want to have 3 children, then you reduce that to the minimum of 29. Okay, so let's say then the upper limit for sisters, assuming a family of 3, is going to be 29. Right, but then you have to flip it back to the brothers, because the question then becomes, when brothers are getting married, do they want to get married to an older sister or to a younger sister? Again, it's not me, imposing this on sisters, but in general, brothers want to marry younger sisters. And this goes back to, again, the talk we had last week when we looked at what is the job of the husband, right? And this was in Surah. This was also in Surah Al Baqarah, verse, I believe it was like 210. Don't just check the live from last week, but as the husband, it is our job then to cultivate our wives, right? Okay, and so you don't cultivate a field that has already been tilled, that has already been tilled and grown fruit, and so as a brother, we want to marry a sister who we can cultivate, who is ready to be cultivated, who is wanting and needing to be cultivated, right? And so you have to think that if this is what this is the instruction that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to brothers about marriage. And so if you're looking for a brother who's going to marry you, then you also have to be in a place where you are prepared to be cultivated by your husband, right? And so the more time you spend out in the world is the less prepared you are to be cultivated, right? Because you're getting all this experience out in the world. And, listen, the longer you spend out in the world as a single sister is the more susceptible you are to having haram sex. This is just real. And the more you are involved with men is the more resistant you're going to be cultivated by your husband. So again, 29, if you're looking at just the physical, technical upper parameters for getting married, we'll say if you want to have 3 children, it's 29. But, really you're making you're reducing your marriage prospects because, a brother will know if you've been out there. And we're looking for a sister who is ready to be cultivated by us, right? And so you really practically, you take that 29 and then you're looking at between 18 and 29, right? But then if you take into account this cultivation factor and the reality that, the more you're out in the world is the harder it is for your husband to cultivate you, and the more resistant you are to be cultivated, then you want to kick that number down as low as possible. So really, 18 or 19 is just fine. So then there's the question of education, but, I want to go to school. I want to get my education. I want to work. Well, there's no reason why that's not something that you can work out with your potential husband. If you want to go to school, then when you meet the brother, you say, listen, school is important to me. When we get married, is it okay that I continue my schooling? You have that negotiation with the brother, and maybe your parents will also have that conversation with the brother's parents. Same thing regarding work. I mean, these are all conversations that you can have with your husband to be prior to getting married, so that you don't get into a marriage and then you feel like you're trapped because all of a sudden your husband says, well, I don't want you to work and I don't want you to go to school. The marriage decision is something that both the potential husband and wife are making. And so there's nothing, there's nothing wrong and there's everything right with getting married, right around 18 or 19, or whenever you're ready to leave your father's house, then to go into your husband's house. And again, if you want to have your education, you can work with your husband to get the education. But then now for the brothers, let's flip back to the brothers. Then there's a financial component, right? So a brother is thinking, okay, so wait a second. So if I'm going to marry a sister and she's still in school, then I have to pay for the school. And if I'm just kind of getting started with my career, maybe I don't have enough money saved up, to pay for this sister's school. Well, again, these are all conversations that you have prior to getting married. And so keeping in mind, this kind of period of cultivation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about, that when you get married, you don't just get married and start having children, right? There's a need of the husband to cultivate his wife. So again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't give, clear direction as to how long it takes to cultivate your wife, but obviously it takes some time. And that period of time before you have children is also something that you talk about and negotiate with your wife. So, if she's in school, obviously she doesn't want to have children right away, and she's young, so she has time. If she has an interest in working, then obviously she doesn't want to have children right away. So you've got a natural, period of time where the brother has to cultivate his wife, and the wife maybe has interests that are outside of bearing children right away. So let's say you give it 5 years, right? Maybe let's say 2 to 5 years to get a degree, and maybe 1 or 2 years to work, if that's what the sister wants to do. And so let's say you've got around 5 years where he's cultivating you, and you are getting used to each other, and the sister maybe is going to school and getting some work done. And you've got a natural 5 years where, and honestly, in the context of a marriage, it's and this is just personal experience. Maybe the Quran says something about this, but I haven't read it yet. But just from my personal experience, there is some adjustment time when you first get married. And so it's not ideal to just run in and start having children right away. It's a good idea to take some time prior to having children and just get used to each other, get used to what it is to be married, and really just enjoy time as a couple, because once the kids come in, they ain't going nowhere. And kids aren't going anywhere. Kids aren't going anywhere for a while. We're talking actually kids never go anywhere. You're a father for life, and you're a mother for life, and so this period of time that you have where it's just the two of you is quite a precious period that you should really enjoy. Traveling is not the same when you when you financially and otherwise, when you've got children to be concerned with. So even just as Islamically aside, just as a man, I would encourage brothers that when you first get married, and sisters, take the time to enjoy your spouse. Take some time to build, a solid relationship and friendship and understanding with them before you just run in and start making babies. So from several perspectives, Islamically, it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs brothers, cultivate your wife, and just personally, personal advice, take the time to enjoy each other. So that let's say you take that 5 years of time, but that also then gives you, brothers, if you're worried about the finances, it also gives you more time to save money for children. So let's say that period is 5 years. So brothers, you've got around 5 years where you're preparing yourself for marriage, and let's say that you're not wealthy when you get married. So on the one hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives men very clear instructions about financially what our responsibility is inside the marriage. But then he also gives us some leeway, right? If you recall last week, we talked about, and again, I don't remember the surah, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states very clearly that it's better to marry a slave who is a believer than somebody who is wealthy and not a believer. Okay, so although men, we are to provide for our families, the reality is that obviously if a sister can marry a slave who has nothing and doesn't even own themselves, that being financially, having savings there ready for everything is not the prerequisite, although it is a responsibility. And if you take into account this period of cultivation, and then on top of that, this period where you're getting to know each other, and maybe if a sister has educational pursuits or anything that she likes, and even in terms of, maybe you guys say, hey, listen, I don't have money, sister, I don't have money, I don't have the ability to take care of you, but I want to marry you. And so, and this, again, you can all negotiate all this prior to getting married. Inshallah, the first few years, if you can work and I can work, then we can save money for a family. And if the sister agrees, and obviously you agree, then you've got you can work together to build a solid financial base. So you don't have to let money and financial concerns stop you from being married. Now there's a surah that I'm trying to find. No, there's a hadith that speaks to that specifically. And I thought I opened it up on my computer here, but I can't find it. So what I'll do is I'll post the hadith in the description. But basically it says that you don't have to be wealthy, that you can be poor and still get married. Okay, so for all you brothers who are saying, well, listen, I haven't saved enough money, and I know that there's quite a few of you out there. I don't have enough money to get married. Money is not a reason. If you meet a sister and you want to marry her and she wants to marry you, you can also discuss, and you can discuss with each other, okay, let's take some time to build up our finances. And if a sister wants to marry you, she'll do the necessary. It's kind of simple. Now, the parents, that's a different conversation. Parents sometimes make it difficult. I understand, fathers want security for their daughters, and they see security as a brother who has money. But really, Islamically, security is a brother who has strong iman and strong deen. That's the security. So that's a conversation that if your parents are giving you a hard time, let's say you're a sister and you want to get married to a brother who doesn't have money, he's got some simple job, and the dad says or the mom says no, he doesn't have enough money. That's just a conversation that you'll have to have with your parents about what the Quran says. Let me find that hadith. I wish I could put this thing on pause. Let's see here. But okay, so I think that makes the age thing a lot more clear for sisters. Is that for sisters we're talking about 18 to 35 technically, but depending on the number of children, that 3 children, that comes down to 29. But then if you're taking into account this cultivation time, then we're looking at 18 years old is fine to get married. And then let's say you wait 5 years, get used to each other, enjoy each other, and then you can start having children. Let's say the sister is right around 23, and at that point the brother will be 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. Right around 30 for the brothers. And so timing for getting married, brothers, we're looking right around 23 at the bottom line after you've done your work. And then sisters, we're looking at around 18. And if you think about it, subhanallah. A brother who's 23 getting married to a sister who's 18, from my experience, I think that, for example, for my daughter, I would want her to marry a brother who's older than her, simply because there is a natural authority that comes with experience, and I want my daughter to submit to her husband. I don't want him to force her to submit. I don't want this tension and cantankerousness and fighting to happen with my daughter and her husband because she's resisting, submitting to him, because she's been out in the world and she thinks that she knows things and she's going to fight with him. I don't want my daughter to experience this. I want her to marry a man that she can respect and admire, and I want her to follow and submit to him. And I want her to submit to him on her own volition and her own accord. I don't want it to be forced or there has to be some period where he's, I don't want that for her. And so even along those lines, I want my daughter to go from my home to her husband's home. And then I want them to spend some time to enjoy each other. And if the brother is not rich, if he's just an average Joe, let's say he's working at a gas station, if he's a garbage collector, honestly, I don't really care. As a father, what I want is for my daughter to marry a man who's got character. If I could take me and, and rewind me, a few years and package myself for my daughter, I would love that because, When I was starting out, I didn't have much, but I've always had character, even when I wasn't a Muslim, or fine, even when I wasn't practicing Islam. I had character, and so I know the value of character, and I know that if you've got character, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless you and your husband moving forward, and your wife moving forward. So just sticking to the directions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us is focus on deen. It's just as if you're looking for a brother and he doesn't have money, don't worry about the money. Focus on deen. The Quran is telling us all of this. And the Quran makes it very clear and very easy. Focus on deen. And if you focus on deen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will everything else will fall into place. And so hopefully that answers the questions for sisters about timing. Just to review, sisters, go from your father's house to your husband's house around 18 or 19 is just fine. It serves your husband, and it serves you no purpose to go out into the world and get messed up. And the longer you spend out into the world, listen, we need affection. We need physical affection. And so let me back up. Now for the brothers, here's another question for the brothers, right? And so let's say the period of preparation takes 5 years, but then here's the question, brothers, are you prepared to be chaste for 5 years? It's possible. It's possible. It's possible to not have sex for 5 years, but it's not practical. Okay, I mean, just think about it, right? Especially in this world where we've got all this visual stimulation coming into your eyes. I mean, you hit puberty around 13, 14, right? You can ejaculate. And then you've got all these images coming at you, like brothers want to have sex. This is just real. Sisters want to have sex too, but for brothers, it's much more difficult because we've got all this stimulation hitting us, and we're visual creatures. And so you want to, subhanAllah, brother wants to have sex. And so now let's say, you're free, you're old enough to have sex. Legally, you can have sex. And what's stopping you? What's stopping you? Well, the only thing that's stopping you is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling you. Now, here's the reality, okay? Society gives men a pass for having sex. And I don't know where this comes from. Well, it comes from the media, right? That somehow it's understood in the world culture that sisters have to remain chaste and brothers can go out and kind of do their thing and get experienced. But that's not Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells men clearly that men have to guard their chastity. And one of the best ways, and there's a hadith, again, I'll post it, but one of the best ways to guard your chastity as a man is to get married. The hadith says very clearly that in order to guard your chastity, get married. And so we've got this preparation time, we've got this work that men have to do prior to getting married, but then we've got sex. And this listen, it's a real pressure. This isn't like a fictitious thing in the mind of a man. Like this is a real daily, nightly, every day of the week pressure. Okay? And if that pressure is too much for you, and probably for most men it is, especially in this hypersexualized world, brothers, get married and then have sex, have halal sex with your wife. So although we've got this time, we've got to, get a job and be something in society and prepare yourself spiritually for a wife, and we got to be ready to cultivate her. There's also this reality that you have to be chaste. Like, you're not supposed to go out and have sex. Like, this is what society says, and a lot of times this is what fathers say and mothers say. Oh, well, let the boy. No. No, don't let the boy. Don't let the boy go and do anything. Like, Like there's this idea that, fathers are guarding their daughters and, hey, I got a shotgun. I got, somebody comes to my daughter and but wait a second. You're like, fathers are guarding their daughters. Okay, I get it. But fathers, why do fathers guard their daughters? Why are fathers so paranoid about their daughters? Are they scared that a lion is going to come and eat her, or a bear or a wolf is going to come and get her? No, they're paranoid about a wild man, an untrained man coming after his daughter. And so just think about this logically, right? If fathers were worried about their sons and mothers were worried about their sons' chastity, and they were protecting their sons just like they're protecting their daughters, then as a father, I don't have to worry about wild, wild men, because these boys are going to look, I look after my boys. I protect my boys. I protect their chastity. I protect what my boys watch, because I don't want them inundated with these images of half-naked women. I don't want them to be, triggered every time they see a woman's flesh. And so as I'm raising them, I'm making sure that I watch what they put in front of their eyes, what they listen to in their ears. And this is where it comes from. I mean, when boys from a very young age were exposed to, images of half-naked women, and it becomes normalized. And then you start to objectify women. You start to reduce a woman down to her parts. You look at her butt and you're like, wow, bam, look at that. Like, no. Listen, I know it's what's done, but it's not okay. It's not okay to objectify women. Like, brothers, you're going to have a daughter one day. Do you want some man looking at your daughter? Okay, let's say that's too far off. Let's say it's your sister. Do you want a man looking at your sister saying, man, look at that butt. Look at those titties. Like, is that how you want a man to look at your sister and then catcalling her and reducing her to her parts? Obviously not. So if it's not something that you want done to your sister, to your mom, to your future daughter or your current daughter, then you shouldn't be doing this to other sisters. Especially sisters who are out in the world trying to carry themselves with respect. Even these sisters are reduced to their parts. It's not right. And so, brothers, we are supposed to guard our chastity. There's no secret hadith. There's no surah that says men are supposed to be experienced in sex when you get married. It doesn't exist. We're supposed to guard our chastity. And how do we guard our chastity? Getting married. And so, yes, we can get married at 18, 19. Yes, we've got a period where we're supposed to develop ourselves, but then there's the pressure of sex. And so, practically, if you can't stand the pressure and you're going to have sex, go get married. Same thing with the sisters. Now, it's a little bit different with the sisters in that, okay, when a sister has sex with a brother, you get attached. There's an emotional attachment that, in general, sisters need to have to physically let a man enter her. Like, sisters who just go out having sex willy-nilly, you're taking on damage. You're taking on emotional and spiritual trauma. And your future husband is going to have to contend with this trauma. Make no mistake, your future husband will have to contend with the trauma that you put yourself through just being out there in the world having sex. If it's 1, 2, 20 guys, like the more men, the more trauma. The more spiritual trauma, the more emotional trauma. Now, out of respect for yourself, don't do it. Out of respect for your future husband and your future family, don't do it. And if as a sister, you know that you're going to need the physical affection, the emotional connection, that you get from having a husband, and you're going to be out in the world getting your degree and working, and because this is your focus, you're going to go out there and take on damage that's going to then jeopardize your future relationship with your husband, which is jeopardizing your future family. Like, think about it. How much sense does that make? Like, if it's a priority for you as a sister to have a family, okay, because I wanted to have a family when I was 16 years old. When I was 16 years old, I knew that I wanted to be a husband that I knew I wanted to be a father. I had a diary, and I was writing about my family, and writing about my wife, and writing about my kids. And so I really tried to move in the world as a husband and as a father. I had, my first, I wasn't always practicing Islam. I was a Christian before. But even when I was a Christian, I took the value that a father and a husband have seriously. I had my first girlfriend. Really, I intended to marry her. It didn't work out, but I was well into my 20s when I made that decision, and the first time that I had sex with a woman, and this woman was my wife to be. So I took, I didn't have a whole bunch of girlfriends and went out and had sex because I was guarding my chastity. It sounds strange, but it does sound strange in this world, but I was guarding my chastity as a man. I wanted to be clean for my wife. Now that's not the way it worked out. But point being is that it's important for brothers to guard your chastity. It's not like you get a pass. Zina is zina. There's not like zina for men and zina for women, and zina for men is a grade below. Like, no, zina is zina. We don't get a pass. Brothers, don't go out there and have sex, because on the flip side, when you go, and the thing is, it's not like you just see a girl in the club and then you just hit it. I mean, that happens sometimes, but more often than not, there's a conversation that happens. And brothers understand that sisters need some level of emotional connection in order to let them penetrate you. And so brothers talk, right? Oh, baby, girl, I love you. Like, you like, that's not right. It's not right. Making your way inside a sister's mind and trying to make inroads into her heart just so that you can get into her panties. It's not right in no way. It's wrong. If you're a Muslim and you're a man of Deen, or you're striving to be a man of Deen, that's not the way to get there. It's poison for your soul, and you're damaging somebody's daughter. You're damaging somebody's sister. Okay? You want to have a family. You want to get married. You want to have sons. You want to have daughters. That sister who you're lying to, that sister who yeah, come on. Like, yeah, that sister.